Hi, this is Among the Hidden by Margaret Peterson Haddix, chapters 1 through 4. Chapter 1. He saw the first tree shudder and fall far off into the distance. Then he heard his mother call out the window, "Luke, inside, now!" He had disobeyed the orders to hide. Even as a toddler, barely able to walk in the backyard's tall grass, he had somehow understood the fear in his mother's voice. But on this day, the day they began taking the woods away, he hesitated. He took only one breath of the fresh air, scented with clover and honeysuckle, and coming from far away, pine smoke. He laid his hoe down gently and savored one last moment of feeling warm soil beneath his bare feet. He reminded himself, "I will never be allowed outside again. Maybe never again as long as I live." He turned and walked into the house as silently as a shadow. "Why?" he asked at the supper table that night. It wasn't a common question in the Garner house. There were plenty of hows. How much rain the backfield get? How's the planting going? Even what's? What did Matthew do with the 5/16 wrench? What's Dad going to do about the busted tire? But why wasn't considered much worth asking. Luke asked again, "Why'd you have to sell the woods?" Luke's dad hummed and paused in the midst of shoveling forkfuls of boiled potatoes into his mouth. "Told you before, we didn't have a choice. Government wanted it. You can't tell the government no." Mother came over and gave Luke's shoulder a reassuring squeeze before turning back to the stove. They had defied the government once, with Luke. That had taken all the defiance they had in them, maybe more. "We wouldn't have sold the woods if we hadn't had to," she said, ladling out thick tomatoey soup. "The government didn't ask us if we wanted houses there." She pursed her lips as she slid the bowls of soup onto the table. "But the government's not going to live in the houses," Luke protested. At 12, he knew better, but sometimes still pictured the government as very big, mean, fat person, 2 or 3 times as tall as an ordinary man, who went around yelling at people, "Not allowed," and "Stop that." It was because of the way his parents and older brothers talked. "Government won't let us plant corn there again." "Government's keeping the prices down." "Government's not going to like this crop." "Probably some of the people who live in those houses will be government workers," Mother said. "It'll be all city people." If he'd been allowed, Luke would have gone over to the kitchen window and peered out at the woods, trying for the umpteenth time to picture rows and rows of houses where the firs and maples and oaks now stood, or had stood. Luke knew from a sneak peek right before supper that half the trees were now toppled. Some already lay on the ground. Some hung at weird angles from their former lofty positions in the sky. Their absence made everything look different, like a fresh haircut exposing a band of untanned skin on the forehead. Even from deep inside the kitchen, Luke could tell the trees were missing because everything was brighter, more open, scarier. "And then when those people move in, I have to stay away from the window?" Luke asked, though he knew the answer. The question made Dad explode. He slammed his hand down on the table. "Then you got to stay away from now. Everybody and his brother is going to be tramping around back there to see what's going on. They see you?" He waved his fork violently. Luke wasn't sure what that gesture meant, but he knew it wasn't good. No one had ever told him exactly what would happen if anyone saw him. Death? Death was what happened to the rotten pig who got stepped on by their stronger brothers and sisters. Death was the fly that stopped buzzing when the swatter hit it. He had a hard time thinking about himself in connection with the smashed fly or the dead pig, gone stiff in the sun. Made his stomach feel funny, even trying. "I don't think it's fair we've got to do this. Luke's chores now." Luke's other brother, Mark, grumbled. "Can't he go outside some? Maybe at night?" Luke waited hopefully for the answer, but Dad just said, "No," without looking up. "It's not fair," Mark said again. Mark was the second son, the lucky second, Luke thought when he was feeling sorry for himself. Mark was 2 years older than Luke and barely a year younger than Matthew, the oldest. Matthew and Mark were easily recognizable as brothers, with their dark hair and chiseled faces. Luke was fairer, small-boned, softer looking. He often wondered if he'd ever look tough like them. Somehow he didn't think so. Luke, don't do nothing nohow," Matthew jeered. "We won't miss his work at all." "It's not my fault," Luke protested. "I'd help more if—" Mother laid her hands on his shoulder. "Hush, all of you," she said. "Luke will do what he can. He always has." The sound of tires on the gravel driveway came through the open window. Now who? Dad started. Luke knew the rest of that sentence. Who could that be? Why were they bothering him now? His first chance all day to sit down. It was a question Luke always heard the end of from the other side of a door. Today, skittish because of the woods coming down, he scrambled up faster than usual, dashing for the door to the back stairs. He knew without watching that Mother would take his plate from the table, hide it in a cupboard, would slide his chair back into a corner so it looked like an unexpected spare. In 3 seconds, she would hide all evidence that Luke existed, just in time to step to the door and offer a weary smile to the fertilizer salesman or the government inspector or whomever else had come to interrupt their supper. Chapter 2. There was a law against Luke. Not him personally, everyone like him. Kids who were born after their parents had already had 2 babies. Actually, Luke didn't know if there was anyone else like him. He wasn't supposed to exist. Maybe he was the only one. They did things to women after they had their second baby so they wouldn't have any more. And if there was a mistake and a woman got pregnant anyway, she was supposed to get rid of it. That was how Mother had explained it years ago, the first and only time Luke had asked why he had to hide. He had been 6 years old. Before that, he had thought only very little kids had to stay out of sight. He had thought as soon as he was old as Matthew and Mark, he would get to go around like they did, riding to the backfield and even into town with Dad, hanging their heads and arms outside the pickup window. He had thought as soon as he gets as old as Matthew and Mark, he could play in the front yard and kick the ball out into the road if he wanted. He had thought as soon as he gets as old as Matthew and Mark, he could go to school. They complained about it, whining, geez, we got to do homework, and who cares about spelling? But they also talked about the games at recess and friends who shared candy at lunchtime or loaned them pocket knives to carve with. Somehow, Luke never got as old as Matthew and Mark. The day of his 6th birthday, Mother baked a cake, a special one with raspberry jam dripping down the sides. At supper that night, she put 6 candles on top and placed it in front of Luke and said, make a wish. Staring into the ring of candles, proud that the number of his years finally made a ring, all around the cake, Luke suddenly remembered another cake, another ring of 6 candles. Mark's. He remembered Mark's 6th birthday. He remembered it because even with the cake in front of him, Mark had been whining. But I want to have a party. Robert Joe had a party on his birthday. He got to have 3 friends over. Mother had said shh and looked from Mark to Luke, saying something with her eyes that Luke didn't understand. Startled by the memory, Luke let out his breath. 2 of the candles flickered and one went out. Matthew and Mark laughed. You ain't getting that wish, Mark said. Baby can't even blow out candles. Luke wanted to cry. He'd forgotten even to make a wish. And if he hadn't been surprised, he would have been able to blow out all 6 candles. He knew he could have. And then he would have gotten, he didn't know, a chance to ride into town in the pickup, a chance to play in the front yard, a chance to go to school. Instead, all he got was a strange memory that couldn't be right. Surely, Luke was thinking about Mark's 7th birthday, or maybe his 8th. Mark couldn't have known Robert Joe back when he was 6, because he wouldn't have been hiding then, like Luke. Luke thought about it for 3 days. He trailed along behind his mother as she hung out the wash on the line, made strawberry preserves, scrubbed the bathroom floor. Several times he started to ask, how old do I have to be before people can see me? But something stopped him every time. Finally, on the 4th day, after Dad, Mom, and Matthew scraped back their chairs from the breakfast table and headed to the barn, Luke crouched by the kitchen window. One, he wasn't supposed to look out because people driving by might catch a glimpse of his face. He tilted his head to one side and raised it up just enough that his left eye was above the level of the windowsill. He watched Matthew and Mark running in the sunlight, the tops of their hog boots thumping against their knees. They were in full sight of the whole world, it seemed, and they didn't care. They were racing to the front door of the barn, not on the side but the backyard that Luke always had to use because it was hidden from the road. Luke turned around and slid to the floor and out of sight. Matthew and Mark never had to hide, did they? He asked. Mother was scrubbing the remains of scrambled eggs out of the skillet. She turned her head and looked at him carefully. No, she said. Then why do I? She dried her hands and lifted the sink, something Luke had almost never seen her do, if they were still dirty dishes left to be washed. She crouched down beside him and smoothed his hair back from his forehead. Oh, Lukey, did you really need to know? Isn't it enough to know things are just different for you? He thought about that. Mother was always saying he was the only one who could ever sit on her lap and cuddle. She still read bedtime stories to him, and he knew Matthew Mark thought it was sissified. Was that what she meant? But he was just younger. He'd grow up. Wouldn't he be like them? With unusual stubbornness, Luke insisted, I want to know why I'm different. I want to know why I have to hide. So Mother told him. Later, he wished he'd asked more questions, but at the time, it was all he could do to listen to what she told him. He felt like he was drowning in the flow of words. Just happened, she said. You just happened. And we wanted you. I couldn't even let your dad talk about getting rid of you. Luke pictured himself as a baby left in a cardboard box by the side of a road somewhere, the way Dad said people used to do with kittens back when people were allowed to have pets. Then maybe that was what Mother meant. The population law hadn't been around long, and I had always wanted a lot of kids. Before, I mean. Getting pregnant with you was like a miracle. I thought the government would get over the foolishness, maybe even by the time you were born, and then I'd have a new baby to show everyone. But you didn't, Luke managed to say. You hid me. His voice sounded strangely hoarse, like it belonged to someone else. Mother nodded. Once I started showing, I didn't go anywhere. That wasn't hard to do. Where do I go anyway? I didn't let Matthew or Mark leave the farms for fear they'd do something. I didn't even say anything about you in letters to my mother and sister. I wasn't really scared then. It was just superstition. I didn't want to brag. I thought I'd go to the hospital to give birth. I wasn't going to keep you a secret forever. But then what? Luke asked. Mother wouldn't look at him. Then they started running all that on TV about the population police. How the population police had ways of finding everything, how they do anything to enforce the law. Luke glanced towards the hulking television in the living room. He wasn't allowed to watch TV. Was that why? And your dad started hearing rumors in town about other babies? Luke shivered. Mother was looking far off into the distance to where a row of new corn plants met the horizon. I always wanted a John, too, she said. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John bless the bed that I lie on. And then I thank the Lord that I have you, at least. And it's worked out with the hiding, hasn't it? The smile she offered him was wobbly. He felt that he had to help her. Yes, he said. And somehow, after that, he didn't mind hiding so much. Who wanted to meet strangers anyway? Who wanted to go to school where, if Matthew and Mark were to be believed, the teachers had yelled and the other boys would double cross you if you didn't watch out? He was special. He was secret. He belonged at home. Home where his mother always let him have the first piece of apple pie because he was there, and the other boys were away. Home where he could cradle the new baby pigs in the barn, climb the trees at the edge of the woods, throw snowballs at the posts on the clothesline. Home where the backyard always beckoned, always safe and protected by the house and the barn in the woods, until they took the woods away. Chapter 3. Luke lay on his stomach on the floor and idly ran the toy train back and forth on the track. The train had belonged to Dad when he was a little boy and his own father before him. Luke could remember a time when the greatest longing had been for Mark to outgrow the train so Luke could have it all to himself. But it wasn't what he wanted to play with today. There was a beautiful day unfolding outside with fleecy clouds in the blue sky and a mild breeze rustling the grass in the backyard. He hadn't left the house in a week now, and he could almost hear the outdoors calling to him. But he wasn't even allowed in the same room with an uncovered window. Are you trying to be discovered? Dad had bellowed at Luke just that morning when he held the shade a few inches back from the kitchen window and peeked out longingly. Luke jumped. He'd been so busy thinking about running barefoot through the grass that he'd half forgotten there was anyone or anything behind him in the house. No one's out there, he said, glancing again to be sure. He'd been trying not to look beyond the ragged edge of the backyard to the bulldozed mess of the branches, trunks, leaves, and mud that had once been his beloved woods. Yeah, Dad said. Did it ever occur to you that if there is, they might see you before you see them? He grabbed Luke by the arm and jerked him back a good 3 feet. Freed from Luke's grasp, the bottom of the shade banged against the windowsill. You can't look out the window, Dad said. I mean it. From now on, just stay away from the windows and don't go into a room unless we've got the curtains or shades pulled. But then I can't see anything, Luke protested. Better that than get turned in, Dad said. Dad sounded like he might feel sorry for Luke, but that only made things worse. Luke turned around and laughed, scared he might cry in front of Dad. Now he gave the toy train a shove and it careened off the track and landed upside down, wheels spinning. Who cares? Luke muttered. There was a harsh knock on his door. Population police, open up. Luke didn't move. It's not funny, Mark, he shouted. Mark opened the door and bounded up the stairs that led to Luke's room proper. Luke's room was also the attic, a fact that he never minded. Mother long ago had shoved all the trunks and boxes as far as they could under the eaves, leaving prime space for Luke's brass bed and circular rug and books and toys. Luke had even heard Matthew and Mark grumble that Luke had the biggest room. They had windows. Scared to this time, didn't I? Mark asked. No, Luke said. Nothing would force him to admit that his heart had jumped. Mark had been playing the population police joke for years, always out of their parents' earshot. Usually, Luke just ignored Mark, but now with Dad as acting so skittish, what would Luke have done if it really was the population police? What would they do to him? Matt and me, we've never told anyone about you, Luke said suddenly, or Mark said suddenly, serious, which was strange for him. And Mother and Dad don't say anything. You're good at hiding, so you're safe, I know, Luke muttered. Mark kicked the toy train Luke had crashed. Still playing with baby toys? He asked as if to make up for slipping and being nice. Luke shrugged. Normally, he wouldn't have wanted Mark to know he played with the train anymore. But today, everything else was so bad that it just didn't matter. Did you come up here just to bug me? Luke asked. Mark put on an offended look. Thought you might want to play checkers, he said. Luke squinted. Mother told you to, right? He asked. No. You're lying, Luke said, not caring how nasty he sounded. Well, if you're going to be that way, just leave me alone, okay? Okay. Mark backed down the stairs. Jeez. Alone again, Luke felt a little sorry he'd been so mean. Maybe Mark had told the truth. Luke should apologize, but he didn't really feel like it. Luke got up and started pacing his room. The squeak of the third board and from the stairs annoyed him. He hated having to duck under the rafters on the far side of his bed. Even his favorite model cars lined up on the shelves in the corner bothered him today. Why should he have a model car? He never even get to sit in a real one. He never would. He never get to do anything or go anywhere. He might as well just rot up here in the attic. He thought about that before on the rare occasion when Mother, Dad, Matthew, and Mark all went somewhere and left him behind. What if something happened to them and they never came back? Would someone find him years from now, abandoned and dead? He read a story in one of the old books in the attic about a bunch of kids finding a deserted pirate ship and then a skeleton in one of the rooms. He'd be like that skeleton. And now that he wasn't allowed in rooms with uncovered windows, he'd be a skeleton in the dark. Luke looked up automatically as if to remind himself that nothing lit the rafters with a single bulb over his head. Except there was light at either end of the ceiling, leaked in under the peak of the roof. Luke stood up and went to investigate. Of course, he should have remembered. There were vents at each end of the roof. Dad grumbled occasionally about heating the attic for Luke. It's just like throwing money out of those vents. Well, Mother always fixed him with one of her stairs, and nothing changed. Now Luke climbed to one of the largest trunks and looked down through the vent. He could see out. He could see a strip of the road and a cornfield beyond, its leaves waving in the breeze. The vent slanted down and limited his view, but at least he was sure nobody would ever see him. For a moment, Luke was excited, but that quickly faded. He didn't want to spend the rest of his life watching corn grow. Without much hope, he stepped down from the trunk and went to the other end of the attic, the portion that faced the backyard. He had to slide boxes around and drag an old step stool from the opposite end of the attic. But finally, his eyes were level with the back vent. The view was not of the backyard, it was too close, but of the former woods. He never realized before, but the land sloped away from his family's house, so he had a clear view of acres and acres that once had been covered with trees. The land was abuzz with activity now. Huge yellow bulldozers shoved back, brush back from the rough road that had been traced out with gravel. Other vehicles Luke couldn't identify were digging holes for huge concrete pipes. Luke watched in fascination. He knew tractors and combines, of course, and had seen his dad's bush hog and manure spreader and gravity wagons up close in the barn. But these machines were different, designed for different jobs, and they were all operated by different people. Once, when Luke was younger, a tramp had walked up to the house, and Luke had only time to hide under the sink in the mudroom before the man was in the house begging for food. The door of the cabinet was cracked, so Luke had been able to peek out and see the man's patched trousers and holey shoes. He'd heard his whiny voice. I ain't got no job. I ain't eaten 3 days. No, I can't do no farm work for my food. What do you think I am? I'm sick. I'm starving. Other than the tramp and pictures in the book, Luke had never seen another human being besides his parents and Matthew and Mark. He never dreamed there was such variety. Many of the people running the bulldozers and shovel contraptions were stripped of their shirts, while others standing nearby even wore ties and coats. Some were fat and some were thin, some were brown by the sun, and some were paler than Luke himself, who would never be tan again. They were all moving, shifting gears, and lowering pipes, waving others with positions, or at the very least, talking at full speed. All that activity made Luke dizzy. The pictures and books always show people still, overwhelmed. Luke closed his eyes and then opened them again for fear of missing something. Luke? Reluctantly, Luke slid down from the step, a stool, and perch, and scrambled over to recline innocently on his bed. Come in, he called to his mother. She climbed the stairs heavily. You okay? Luke dangled his feet over the side of the bed. Sure, I'm fine. Mother sat on the bed beside him and patted his legs. She swallowed hard. It's not easy, the life you've got to live. I know you'd like to be outside. You'd like to go outside. That's okay, Mother, Luke said. He could have told her about the vents. He didn't see how anyone would object to him looking out there. Something stopped him. What if they took that away from him, too? What if Mother told Dad and Dad said, No, it's too much of a risk. I forbid it. Luke wouldn't be able to stand it. He kept silent. Mother ruffled his hair. You're a trooper, she said. I knew you'd hold up all right. Luke leaned against his mother's arm, and she moved her arm around his shoulders and hugged him tight to her side. He felt a little guilty for keeping a secret, but mostly reassured, loved and reassured. Then, more to herself than to him, Mother added, and things could be worse. Somehow, that wasn't comforting. Luke didn't know why, but he had a feeling what she really meant was that they were going to get worse. He snuggled tighter against Mother, hoping he was wrong. Chapter 4. Luke found out what Mother meant a few days later when he came down for breakfast. As usual, he opened the door from the back stairs to the kitchen, only a crack. He could remember barely a handful of times in his entire life when someone had dropped by before breakfast, and each time Mother had managed to send Matthew or Mark up to warn Luke to stay out of sight. But he always checked. Today he could see Dad and Matthew and Mark at the table and knew from the sound of the frying bacon that Mother must be at the stove. Are the shades closed? He called softly. Mother opened the door to the stairs. Luke started to step into the kitchen, but she put out her arm to keep him back. She handed him a plate full of scrambled eggs and bacon. Luke, honey, can you eat sitting on the bottom step there? What? Luke asked. Mother looked beseechingly over her shoulder. Dad thinks, it's not safe anymore to have you in the kitchen. You could still eat with us and talk to us and all, but you'll be over here. She waved her hand towards the stairs behind Luke. Well, with the shades pulled, Luke started. One of those workers asked me yesterday, Hey, farmer, you got air conditioning in that house of yours? Luke said from the table. He didn't turn around. He didn't seem to want to look at Luke. We keep the shades pulled. On a hot day like today, people get suspicious. This way is safer. I'm sorry. And then Dad did turn around and glance at Luke once. Luke tried to keep from looking upset. So what'd you tell him? Matthew asked if the worker's question was only a matter of curiosity. Told him, of course we don't have air conditioning. Farming don't make nobody a millionaire. Dad took a long sip of coffee. Okay, Luke, Mother asked. Yes, he mumbled. He took the plate of eggs and bacon, but it didn't look good to him now. He knew every bite he ate would stick to his throat. He sat down on the steps, out of sight of both kitchen windows. We'll leave the door open, Mother said. She hovered over him as if unwilling to return to the stove. This isn't too much different, is it? Mother, Dad said warningly. Through the open window, Luke could hear the mumble of several trucks and cars. The workers had arrived for the day. He knew from watching through the vent the past few days from the caravan of vehicles came up to the road like a parade. The cars would peel off to the side and unload the nicer dressed men. The more rugged vehicles pulled in on the muddiest sections, and the people inside would scatter to the bulldozers and backhoes that had been left outside overnight. But the vehicles barely had time to get cold because the workers were there now from sunup to sundown. Someone was in a hurry for them to finish. Luke, I'm sorry, Mother said and scurried back to the stove. She loaded a plate for herself, then sat at the table beside Luke's usual spot. His chair wasn't even in the kitchen anymore. For a while, Luke watched Dad, Mother, Matthew, and Mark eating in silence, a complete family of four. Once he cleared his throat, ready to protest again. You can't do this. It's not fair. Then he choked back the words unspoken. They were only trying to protect him. What could he do? Resolutely, Luke stuck his fork in the pile of scrambled eggs on his plate and took a bite. He ate the whole plate of food without tasting any of it.